Okay, so good morning everyone and welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of the public and press observing today's proceedings. Can we ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout, except for the members who are sitting? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of the reviews. The meeting has been convened in response to 3 requests for a review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling them to the meeting. I'll now pass over to Mr. Masson, the Assistant Clerk, who will outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and take a roll call of all members present.
Thank you. So members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. The first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. The regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. The focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. The circumstances in which additional matters can be taken into account are set out in the legislation and will be addressed by the LRB's advisors where relevant. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. And just for anybody observing today, Councillor McCrae will be chairing the meeting for the first 2 reviews, and he and Councillor Clark will then leave because the 3rd review is in their electoral ward. Councillor Copeland will then chair the 3rd review. Councillor Cook is subbing for Councillor Alphonse for the 3rd review only. Thank you. I'll now hand over.
Thank you very much. Okay, turning to consideration of the first review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for change of use from commercial office space to 2 number of residential dwellings, including formation of French doors to existing window opening, window enlargement to form new openings with Juliet balconies, replacement door and installation of roof lights to the rear, reinstallation of railings and gates to the front, formation of car parking at the rear, and landscaping works with associated boundary treatment at 11 Victoria Street, City Centre, Aberdeen, AB 10 1XB, planning reference 240268. We'll now hand over to the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I point out today that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she's not been involved in the early consideration of the applications under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms. Green, over to you.
Thank you, convener. Hopefully you can see my screen there.
We can, yes, thank you.
Okay, so this review was requested for the non-determination of the application for change of use from office to residential dwellings, etc. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit following expiry of the 2-month period for determination of the application. The applicant indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters raised in the submissions, and it's noted that there is a further revision of a drawing that was submitted for the original application, and I'll come to that during the presentation. In terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicants expressed the view that the review may benefit from a site visit, and it should also be noted that there is a listed building consent pending decision. Members may also remember that a similar proposal came before the LRB last year and was approved, and I'll explain the difference between the 2 proposals as I go through the plans. So I'll continue and provide some background information on the case before handing back for the convener and members to discuss and decide how to proceed. So site visit, site plan, application site located on the east side of Victoria Street, just between its junction with Afford Place and Waverley Place. And it's within the Albine Place Rubus-Flor conservation area, and it comprises a traditional Category C listed 2-storey with attic and terraced granite property of a block of 3. And this is just the aerial photograph. That's the property there. The main frontage building fronting onto Victoria Street, and then this existing rear extension and the yard. And then the lane here. And we've got a 3D image from Google. So that's the property there, with the existing rear extension and the original building there, and then this yard area would also be included in the site. And these are the downtakings shown to alter the existing building. So there'd be internal partitions removed and then walls blocked up between the original building and the existing extension. And you can see there that roof lights would be installed. So works to the elevations. This is the elevation onto Victoria Street where there would be no change. And then the openings would be increased in size, lengthened for larger windows, and patio doors installed on the ground floor. I've got the elevations as proposed on a slide in a moment. And that's a cross section of the building. And then the elevations as proposed, so Victoria Street as existing, and then alterations to the rear extension. So all windows and doors would be timber and finished in white. There'd be Juliet balconies in galvanised steel with grey powder coating finish, a new set of French doors, and then the Velux roof lights would be in this roof. And the former office space is converted into 2 dwellings, with one accessed from Victoria Street and one accessed from the rear lane. So that's one of the changes in this application, is that the building that fronts onto Victoria Street would no longer have a back door coming out onto the rear lane through the extension. So the rear property would have the entirety of that rear extension, and the frontage property would have the original building fronting onto Victoria Street. That's a cross section, so this would be the frontage property, and the rear property would have this existing extension. So the ground floor layout plan, this is the one considered by the case officer. The Victoria Street's here. New railings would be installed as part of the proposal. This tree planted. This is the frontage building. Under the previous application, there was access through here to the rear garden, but that's now been closed off, so there's acoustic separation between the buildings. So that would be access just from Victoria Street, and this property within the rear extension would have access along here. This area parking space is identified for use by the frontage property. And then the other change is that in terms of the internal layout, previously the bedroom was on the ground floor in this rear dwelling. So those have been swapped around. So the living room's now on the ground floor and the bedroom's on the upper floor. And yeah, similar to the previous application, the wall would be rebuilt to separate this rear area from the neighbours. And it's also proposed to have a low 300mm wall along the edge of the parking space just to separate the walkway. Now this drawing is the later revision that was submitted with the LRB. It shows lighting along the wall. And that was actually the subject of a condition that there should be lighting. So in that sense, it's not new information, but it is a further revision of the layout drawing. The applicants also mentioned in their response to the draft report, the case officer's draft report, that they would be content for this parking space to be just garden ground. Just moving on to the first and second floor plans. Yeah, so you can see that first floor level, this is now a bedroom, and there's a sliding partition that could be used to separate off part of the bedroom, which would go across there. Oh, sorry, move the plan on. I'll just go back. Otherwise, there's a slight difference in the layout to the front property, but it doesn't really, it's the same. It's a bedroom. There's just a slight difference in the size of the bathroom and the dressing area. So this is just showing the rear garden and parking area on a slightly larger scale, so you can see what's happening there. Parking space identified for the frontage property, and then this decking area for the dwelling that's at the rear. And then it's just showing the tree planted there and the railings. Yeah, elevations of the proposed railings and timber fence that would separate the two rear areas. And again, the applicant in their statement in response to the draft report stated that they would be content to increase the height of that fence if it was felt necessary for privacy by condition. Otherwise, the railings and the wall were proposed under the previous application, so those are similar. So moving on to the reasons within the case officer's draft report. So I'll just run through these. An unacceptable level of residential amenity for the flat to the rear with a single aspect onto the rear lane. An acceptable level of private amenity space for the 3-bed flat to the Victoria Street frontage due to the external space on the street frontage there, with no private amenity space. That the flat to the rear would have a single aspect, and because of the high level of glazing, there would be overlooking, and that seems to be through the roof lights into the bedroom. Access to the rear flat would be off an unlit, unadopted service lane with limited natural surveillance and no active street frontage, and so safety issues, in particular women's safety, have been highlighted by the case officer. The property to the rear would have no public face to the street and wouldn't fit within the established pattern of street-facing buildings. Neither dwelling would have acceptable amenity with single aspect to the rear, and would therefore be contrary to policies D1 on design and D2 on amenity in the local development plan, the APG on amenity and space standards, and also National Planning Framework for Policy 14 on design and Policy 16 quality homes. And they state there would be no adverse impact on the conservation area and on climate and nature crises. So just looking at the applicant's case, they state the principle of residential use is acceptable for the area. It's actually policy VC3, I think it is, that it falls within. It's acknowledged that the proposal would have no adverse impact on the character and appearance of the Albion Place and Ruberslow Conservation Area. The proposal would suitably address the aims of policies on tackling the climate and nature crises, climate mitigation, biodiversity and brownfield sites within NPF 4, that it would suitably accord with the aims of the Historic Environment Policy for Scotland and Policy D4, Historic Environment in the Local Development Plan, and also would accord with NPF 4 policy on waste management, zero waste and sustainable transport. They make some further points. They recount the planning history with the previous LRB approval. Describe the main changes, removing internal access from the front house to the rear, which would mean that the residents in the front house had a 70-metre walk round to the garden parking space. And that is not unusual in cities, and also the swap of the bedroom and living space to the rear. The 3-bed dwelling to the front would have garden on that frontage, which is west facing, and would have generous windows. They state that there could be planting within that garden along the back of pavement within the garden just to increase amenity, and they would be content with a condition to that effect, or in fact removing the parking space and creating garden there. They state that the 1-bed dwelling has a garden and pleasant surroundings with light enhanced by the change in the proposal, that there would be access from a well-used lane, which is a safe area, that the openings between the new and old, so the existing extension and the original building, those would be infilled, and that would achieve acoustic separation and reduce disturbance. That the properties would be close to Ruberslow Terrace Gardens, cafes and facilities, etc. Single aspect properties and dwellings are common, and this particular one would have larger windows and large ground floor area. They state that the lane is shorter than many driveways, with 15 metres to the rear entrance, and the applicant would accept lighting fixed to the boundary wall, as we've seen in the revision to the layout drawing. And the rear flat would have a public frontage to the lane, which is used to access other properties, and as I mentioned, the fence could be heightened by condition. So also to mention, in terms of consultations, the roads team had no objections. There was a further submission where the applicant had been in touch with the roads team, and they stated they would also have no objection to removal of the parking space. Environmental health, there were no comments from them, no objection from the waste team. And the city centre community council, there were no comments received, and there were no representations. So at this point, I will hand back to you, convener, for members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the appeal. Members, reminder, if you do not feel like you have enough information to take a decision, we can request further written information to be provided, a hearing to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At the moment, I feel we have sufficient information to proceed, but we'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Clark.
I feel there's sufficient information. Sorry about that, Kieran. I was having problems switching on my mic.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland. And Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, I think we've got sufficient information.
Thank you very much. So, as members feel like they have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for the review.
Thank you, convener. Hopefully you can see the slides again now. So these are the relevant policies within NPF 4. As policies 1, 2 and 3 are overarching and relevant to almost every application in terms of climate change, mitigation and biodiversity. There's policy on historic assets, which seeks to retain the character of conservation areas and listed buildings. Policy 9 encourages development of empty buildings. Policy 12 promotes reuse of buildings also. And policy 13 encourages development in sustainable locations. Now, I've highlighted there the two policies which were identified by the case officer as either being contravened or sort of so policy 14 relates to design and is similar to policies on design in the adopted local plan, which I'll cover in the next slide. Policy 16 doesn't particularly relate to changes of use, but it is relevant because it emphasises residential character and amenity and the importance of those. So policy 14 on design contains 6 qualities for successful places. I won't go through them all because I think we're all familiar with them, but just to highlight the first one, which is that we should create healthy places supporting the prioritisation of women's safety and improving physical and mental health. So moving on to the local development plan policies, site lies within an area zoned under VC6, the West End area, and that policy is not particularly relevant, but does accept changes of use to residential. Policy D1 on design, that is one of the ones that the case officer highlighted in their report, and I'll move on to a slide just talking about that one. Policy D2 on amenity, I've got on the next slide as well, which so we'll have a look at in a bit more detail. Policy D6 seeks to preserve and enhance the historic environment. Policy D8 on windows and doors seeks to retain historic windows and doors. And there wasn't identified that there was any issue with that in terms of the proposals for windows and doors in the application. Policy R5 on waste management just seeks to ensure space for waste storage, and T2, similar to the NPF4 policy, seeks development in accessible areas, and policy T3 on parking indicates that low or no car development would be acceptable in this area, and then also relevant for development within listed buildings and conservation areas is historic environment policy for Scotland and the Albine Place and Rubislaw Conservation Area character appraisal. So just moving on to D2. Again, I won't go through all these criteria, but they highlight sunlighting, views, privacy, natural surveillance, active street frontages, access to semi-private open space. Those are all the factors that would be considered in terms of that policy. And then design policy D1. Again, this policy recognises that not all development will be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but it recognises that good design and detail adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. Again, it's got the 6 qualities, including safe and pleasant. So just a reminder on this slide of the primacy of the development plan, all applications to be determined in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and treated on its own merits. So the basis for decision in this particular case, the previous decision is a material consideration, as that proposal could obviously be implemented. So how would the changes with this revised proposal impact the level of amenity as set out in the policies on design D1, amenity D2, and policy 14 in NPF 4, also on design? So those changes are the means of access to the garden, the removal of that link between the frontage property and the rear garden space, and safety in the lane for the rear dwelling. And there's also the duty to consider the impact on the conservation area and the listed building. So does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations that would weigh for or against the proposal? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any member have any questions for Ms. Green?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do, convener. Lucy, can you put up the picture of the building with the rear, please? It's sort of the aerial view looking down.
Yep, just a moment.
Excuse me.
That one.
Yes. What I'm wondering, this is a shared back area, is it? Between the two
Under the
dwellings?
proposal.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Under the proposal, there would be a wall built along there.
Right.
And then the dwelling within this part of the building would have the first part of the garden. And then the frontage dwelling would have this section where there would plans indicate a parking space, and they would have to access it by walking around.
Okay.
Previously, they would have had access through the building. That's the main change.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, members?
Oh, sorry, one more.
Hold on, got it done. Councillor Clark.
Hello, Lucy, can you confirm for me, we're on about the waste management here just now. Well, that's my plan to go on about that. The bin collection for the house that faces Victoria Street, does that go to the garden where the house at the back, their bins are stored at the back? Can you clarify that for me?
That hasn't changed at all under this application. I think their collection is still from the front.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Copeland.
No, it's the same question.
Okay, that's been covered off. Perfect. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we'll move to determination. Okay, so in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. We'll highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Off the back of this, just looking through in terms of D1 quality placemaking, I think that the swap from the bedroom on the ground floor to the first floor of the flat to the back, I think that would, and remembering back to the previous LRB, there was some discussion regarding the amount of sunlight into that bedroom. Now that that's on the first floor, I would think that that would be further enhanced. So I'd be quite comfortable with D1. In terms of D2 amenity, city centre living, it's not going to be as enhanced as further out into the suburbs of Aberdeen. I think bringing office space back into residential use in the city centre brings people back into the city centre again, so I'm quite content with that. And D6, in terms of historic environment, putting the building back to the original sort of home and further reinstalling the railings outside the front of the property would further enhance the streetscapes. Quite comfortable with that. And D2, sort of further enhancing, the sunlight aspect of that with the swap of the bedroom up to the upper floor. But we'll quickly go around the room and see how others feel on that. But anyone want to come in?
Yeah, please, Convener. I'm basically with you, but I am concerned about the access via the lane at night. I think that would be my only concern. But I think overall, as you said yourself, taking office space back into residential is actually a benefit for the city centre. So I guess I could live with that. But again, I'd be wanting to ensure there was adequate lighting put in as a condition.
Yeah, I think that lighting condition in terms of the curtilage of the property would be, I'm happy with that because they have provided, I think that was a condition of the previous application anyway, to provide that lighting. In terms of the safety of the back lane, yes, it is a little bit of a walk around. I don't think it's that far off the road, but yeah, I do understand the concerns there. But I do note that there's a number of other properties in the city centre, especially around the areas of Crown Street and down by the Castlegate, where residents have to work or walk a little bit further off of the main property frontage to get to access their properties. So, it's not new. It has been done elsewhere in the city, but yeah, I do know that concern in the back of there as well. But I would be comfortable if the lighting was conditioned, at least with the curtilage of the property, and to ensure that we are sort of have a little bit of coverage there. Councillor Lawrence, I'll bring in yourself. And you've unmute, Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, it's just about the lighting. Is the lane it's going to be illuminated? Yeah, is that definitely going to be happening?
I'll maybe bring in Miss Green to that one, but I would understand with the additional drawing we've received, it would be to the curtilage of the site only, but I'd clarify with Miss Green.
Yes, I mean the drawings indicating lighting along the wall within the curtilage only. I'm not sure that we could actually condition requiring lighting in the lane because it's beyond the applicant's control. So it would be within the curtilage.
Yeah, well, that is my main concern, along with Councillor Copeland, that the women's safety at night in the dark coming down that lane, because it is city centre and there's loads of people knocking around.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. I too have got concern of the lane at night, the darkness of it. Women's safety, yes, but also male safety, anybody's safety using that lane. I'm concerned about it being dark. Yeah, we've heard it's all short walks round to the front, like when the back flat takes its bins round to the front to be emptied, etc. I do have a concern about the lighting.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we happy to move to determination on this one? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I would be happy to approve at this time on the planning reasons I've put forward in D1, D2, D6. But I'm happy for others to go around the room and see how they're feeling. Councillor Clark.
Like yourself, I'm happy to approve. As I said, my concern only is the lighting at this point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, I'm the same. My only real concern is the light in the lane, but I think everything else I would approve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I will go along and make it unanimous to approve. Other properties are access for that lane as well, but I think they've all got main street access as well. The main lane, I think, is quite well used, but we're speaking about a wee spur here, which gives me some concern. So, provided we have adequate lighting conditioned on the curtilage of the building, I'm happy to go with it.
Thank you very much. Therefore, in accordance, where are we? I've lost my place in my paper there. So the local review body has therefore agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer. We now need to consider whether any conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. Ms. Green, just in terms of the lighting to the curtilage of the property and that to be conditioned, do members have any other conditions that they wish to place on this property?
Nope.
Ms. Green.
We did previously attach a condition about refuse storage. So details of refuse storage for the dwelling to the rear, and that should be installed.
Agreed.
Yep, happy
Agreed.
for that to be conditioned as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, members. So please note a decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days, although I do think they are on this call, so they will be aware. Thank you very much. Okay, so turning to consideration of the second review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for the change of use of a flat to short-term let accommodation sui generis, with maximum occupancy of 4 people at 155 Bonacor Street, Aberdeen, AB 116XE, planning reference 240350. We'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will take us through the relevant reasons to why the application was refused.
Thanks. I'll just share my screen again. Okay, so this review is against refusal of an application under delegated powers for change of use to short-term let. And the applicant indicated that there are no new matters within the submissions. And in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that we may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll continue and provide some background to the case before handing back to members to decide how to proceed. So looking at the location of the application site, here on the corner of Bonaccord Street and Caledonian Place, sat there on the within the wider city. And this is the property here. The application relates to a 2-bed flat at first floor level up here. It's accessed from this separate entrance to the rear. And then it takes access within this curved staircase. And the front garden is owned by the ground floor flat, with the rear garden being shared. Properties category B listed, and it's in the Marine Terrace Conservation Area. overhead picture of the property there. So the access through the gate here, up the stair tower. I've got photograph taken by the case officer. So you can see the gate there, and the route would be across the garden in through this entrance and up to the first floor level. So you can see there the ground and basement level and ground floor flats that are noted within the report and submissions. And it looks like a door just behind that shrub. Another of the case officer's photographs looking back from the entrance within the stair tower towards the gate. And this is the layout plan of the upper floor flat. 2 bedrooms and separate kitchen and living room. And the reasons for refusal were impact on amenity and security of the neighbour within the ground floor flat, with transient guests using an otherwise private rear garden and site entrance, and the guests would pass the rear windows within the ground floor and basement flat, being able to look in with a privacy impact, and that it was therefore contrary to NPF 4 Policy 30 on tourism and Policy H1 residential areas in the local development plan. So for the applicant's case, can be summarised as follows. With regard to security, the ground floor flat uses the main front door as its main entrance, and that would be unaffected by the proposal. And they state that there would be management of the frequency and nature of guest stays, with guests being vetted and clear house rules being applied, which would result in minimal disruption to the ground basement flat. They state that the neighbour who shares the garden has not objected to the proposal, and also that they would be willing to install screening and landscaping to prevent overlooking. They state that the short-term let would align with the broader aims of Policy 30 to support tourism and local economy, and also that overall, with mitigation, the impact on residential amenity would be negligible, with a high standard of maintenance of the building and monitoring of the guests. And terms of consultations, the waste team had no objections. Guests would continue to use residential bins until a commercial collection was established. The roads team had no concern or objection, with them stating parking would be the same as for a mainstream residential flat, and the site's within a controlled parking zone. And Ferryhill and Rotherstone community councils had no comments, submitted no representation, that is, and there were no other representations. So at this point, I'll hand back to convener and members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, again, reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, we can request further written information to be provided. It needs to be arranged or a site visit to be undertaken. At the moment, I'm happy to proceed, but we'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Clark.
I am happy to continue.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, happy to continue.
Thank you. And Councillor Copeland.
Yes, happy to continue.
Thank you very much. We'll hand back to my screen again.
So looking at the relevant policies, National Planning Framework 4 policies, first of all, policies 1, 2 and 3, relevant to all applications. And you may wish to note that the application is for change of use only, so it's in considering the magnitude of any impact. All decisions should give significant weight to the climate and nature crises, climate mitigation and contribution to the enhancement of biodiversity. Policy 7 on historic assets seeks to protect the character of conservation area and the fabric and setting of the listed building. As Policy 13 states that developments should be accessible by public transport and active travel. And then there's Policy 30 on tourism, which you'll just have a look at in a bit more detail. So looking at point B, proposals for tourism-related development will take into account the local economy, compatibility with surrounding area, the impact on communities, opportunities for sustainable travel, accessibility for disabled people, measures to minimise carbon and access to the natural environment. And then, in particular, these criteria for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term holiday lets will not be supported where there would be an unacceptable impact on local amenity, the character of the neighbourhood, or loss of residential accommodation where such loss is not outweighed by local economic benefits. The local development plan policies, the sites within an area zoned under policy H1 residential areas, and I'll cover that policy on the next slide. In terms of historic environment, this is similar to NPF 4, seeking to protect the character of the conservation area and listed buildings. Policy D2 on amenity states things like privacy and security are covered by that policy. Policy R5 on waste management for new developments seeks to ensure that there's adequate provision for storage facilities. Policy VC2, I'll cover that on the next slide as well. And then parking and sustainable travel cover developments being in locations that are where public transport's provided for, as well as active travel, and parking. I think we've covered. It seeks appropriate levels of parking for developments. So policy H1 residential areas, where the proposal is for a non-residential use such as this, they will be supported if they're considered to be complementary to residential use, or there would be no conflict with or nuisance to the enjoyment of existing residential amenity. And then policy VC2 on tourism and culture, proposals for new and expansion of existing visitor attractions and associated facilities will be supported, and they should be sequentially located in the city centre or on sites allocated for that use, unless activity and locational issues demonstrate that this is impracticable. And this is policy D2 on amenity, just picking out a couple of the points in there that occupiers should be afforded adequate levels of amenity in relation to light, noise, air quality and outlook, and also adequate levels of privacy. And also relevant to short-term lets is the government's publication, which highlights the important contribution to the tourist economy, where they provide a unique tourist experience and a sort of accommodation that's not served by hotels and hostels. Also, they can offer more affordable accommodation and cover particular events where there's high demand within a short space of time. And there's also Scottish Government research looking at the most common positive impact of short-term lets on the local economic on the local economy in association with tourism. There is also the circular on short-term lets and planning, which refers to policy 30 that we looked at earlier. It states that the benefits of short-term lets should be balanced against wider policy objectives, and it highlights that they may be granted for a limited time. So overall, primacy of development plan in decision making, with decisions being made in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and each application being treated on its merits. So in this particular instance, site zoned within a residential area where residential amenity is consideration, and that's also a consideration in terms of policy 30. The appropriateness of the location is an issue for consideration, and the impact on the local economy. So does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, members?
Yeah, Copeland.
Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Basically, do we know if the flat is currently vacant or if it's occupied?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. That'll do.
Just a question from myself in relation to the statement regarding the neighbour that hadn't objected. Do you know what neighbour this was in relation to? Is there 3 flats in this unit, or is there a single flat and then on top the short-term let?
There are 2 flats existing. So one of them uses the basement and ground floor, and the other one's the one that's subject to the application. So they're referring to the ground and basement flat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yes, could it be possible for me to see the photographs of the front and rear access again? I'm sorry for this.
Yes, not sure that I had a photograph of the front access, but I can look on Google Street View. Just a minute, I'll pull up the photograph of the rear. So yeah, that's the gate from the street, and then up the steps to this doorway.
Thank you.
And I had another photograph as well, just looking back towards the gate.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
I can pull up the front entrance to
Okay.
the flat if you.
Yeah,
Right.
please.
Right. Just find it on Google Street View.
Mm.
Yeah, so that would be the entrance for the ground, the flat that has the ground and basement.
That's fine. Thank you. That's cleared that up for me. Thank you.
Councillor Copeland.
Yes, but just to clarify, the ground and basement flat, is that 155 Bonacross Street as well, or is that Caledonian Place? Because I noticed around the back it says 155 on the turret for that address. So is the ground, in other words, got a different address?
Yes, it must have. Yes, because it's definitely 155 on this gate.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because the other one's entrance looks to be on Caledonian Place. Is that right? Or is that actually Bonico Street, that bit?
No, that's Caledonian Place, the front entrance.
Smashing, thank you.
Okay, any further questions, members? Not seeing anyone at this time. Okay, so in accordance with the procedural notes circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case are being considered and taken into account. Determination, members. I'm conflicted, so I'm going to go around the room first and see how others feel on this before I come in. Anyone wish to enter?
Yes, I would be inclined to grant the application. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark.
At this precise moment, I would be granting, but with conditions the area that for the protection of the basement flat, the access.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, I would agree with that. The screening and landscaping, I think, would be a condition we could put on. Because I think it is looking, especially into the basement area. I don't know how the property is set up, which room is which, but you know, this a bit of screening and landscaping would give a wee bit of privacy.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the point of screening and landscaping, but I worry if screening might actually block some sunlight and get into the ground floor and basement flat. We were putting some sort of screening in there. Would that affect the amenity of that flat by curtailing the sunlight? Would the remedy be worse than leaving it? That's what I'm thinking.
Miss Green, if a condition was placed on this regarding screening, would that need to be provided to us or to planners before that goes ahead? Would that be a condition of that?
Yes, we could word a condition so that the details were provided to planners before it went ahead. And I suppose it could be worded as such that if it transpired that the you know, because of the lighting issue, I suppose the resident might rather not have it, then we could agree to that perhaps if we put that wording into the condition.
Councillor Copeland, how would you be minded on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be quite happy basically. I mean, I know we can't put by agreement with the other resident because they might not agree to anything.
Yeah.
But I think we should say, should the resident downstairs require screening, then what is put in is got to be agreed by us. Can we do that?
I mean, I would require us to approve the details, and then I think we could say that it must be erected unless otherwise agreed in writing with the planning authority, and we could then look at whether there'd been discussion, and we have the ability to agree it or agree that it doesn't happen, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that. I mean, I'm just worried that somebody get rather creative with the screen and block a light to the ground flat. So basically, if you like, I'm looking for a sensible solution that everybody's happy with. But again, it's how do you want it?
I mean, I suppose the other option might be to require that there's some sort of light transmission through it, you know, so it could be, you know, I don't know. I mean, it could be a glazed screen that might be a bit over the top, but it could be something that allowed light through, which planting might allow for a trellis, or, you know, we could put something into the condition that still gave the option for them, you know, it still gave various options, but allowed for some sort of light transmission.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was minded to go in terms of policy D2 and amenity. The screening with the potential increased transient residents coming in through there using the short-term let, would that have an issue with the amenity of the ground and the basement flat? But if the screening was put up, that would offset that, but then would it block out light? So I'm happy with going towards the conditioning of that, depending on the light transmission into the property. So I'm happy to approve as long as it's conditioned. So I think going around the room, we're unanimously agreed on overturning the officer's recommendations on this to approve, and that we would need to put in that appropriate condition in terms of the light screening to that property, the existing property. Are members happy with that?
Yes.
Yes, can I say appropriate screening and leave it at that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
I'm happy.
I'm sure Lucy can come up with some appropriate wording for that, Ms. Green.
Yes, sorry, I was just going to ask whether you wish to also attach the 5-year temporary condition that just allows us to look at the situation with housing in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep that consistent with the city.
Yes, please.
Perfect. So, as the local review body has therefore agreed to overturn decisions of appointing an officer as conditioned, and that will be passed out to the relevant agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you very much, members. Right, that moves us on to application number 3, of which myself and Councillor Clark will need to leave. So give us a few moments, we'll get everything set up for number 3, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Copeland. Thank you very much.
Right, welcome, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Cook. That's just you, me, and Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Clark, are you observing, or are you leaving us, or what are you doing? That's just left us. Right, sorry, I just put my volume up. Can you all hear me? Good. Right. Lucy, you ready to go?
Yes.
Right, here we go then. Turning to consideration of the third review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the erection of a single-storey extension to the front at 26 Spear Road, Aberdeen, AB 166SE, planning reference 240225. We will again hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Mrs. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was approved. Again, I point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance, because she is not involved in the earlier consideration of the application and the review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one, involving the position of factual information and guidance only. Ms. Green, do you want to take it from there?
Yep, I'll just share my screen. Okay. So this is a request for review against an application refused under delegated powers for a single-storey extension to the front. And the review was submitted within the necessary timescale. The applicant indicated on the notice that there are no new matters raised in the review submissions. And in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll proceed to provide some details before members deciding how to proceed. So this is the location plan. Here on Spey Road, on the front elevation, is the proposed extension, and that's just showing the property there within the wider area. So street view from Google Maps of the property here. It's within a row of 8 terraced houses, and the driveway is approximately 12 metres in length. It's south facing, and it has this existing slate finished pitched roof over the doorways. Well, that's the neighbouring doorway. And that projects about 1/2 metre from the house. Just a close-up of the frontage of the applicant property. And I'll move on to the drawings. So this is as existing with the covering over the front door, and as proposed would be this front extension. Materials: concrete roof tiles, dry dash to match the house, and UPVC downpipes. It would be 5.9 metres wide, and it would project 1.6 metres from the house. The existing slate roof over the door of the neighbour would remain, and that's at 3.1 metres, with the proposed roof being at 3.4 metres. So looking at the layout plans, as existing here, the front of the house, just showing the roof canopy over the doorway, and then the proposed extension here. It would extend the living room and the hallway with the porch. So proposed west elevation. So that would be next to the neighbour on the west side. And similar on the east side elevation there. And that's the existing, just showing the overhanging roof over the front door. So reasons for refusal in the case officer's report and the decision notice. Design, scale and size of extension would disrupt the building line of the terrace, and that the extension is not a modest subordinate porch extension and would include living accommodation. It would not be substantially glazed and therefore contrary to the Householder Development Guide. It would set a precedent for full-width front extensions, resulting in the loss of a building line and impact on the front elevation of the rest of the terrace. And also, together with the rear extension and outbuilding, would result in substantial development of the plot, though it is noted that that wouldn't be over half of either the front or rear areas, nor double the original footprint of the house. The proposal would therefore be contrary to NPF 4 policies 14 on design, 16 on quality homes, and local development plan policies H1 on residential areas and D1 on quality placemaking. A further reason would be that there are solid side walls which would negatively impact on the neighbours, with number 28 being impacted to both the front and rear, as it would be a single room that extends through the house, being impacted by both front and rear extensions, and that it would be therefore contrary to policy D2 on amenity, in addition to the policies previously stated. So for the applicant's case, it's stated that the area contains other examples of front extensions breaking building lines. I've got a few photographs of the ones that they mention on the next slide. There are also examples of extending canopies over doorways with roofs with a 1 metre projection. They state that the row of terraces is unique in the area in terms of the long front gardens and the small rear gardens, and therefore a modest front extension would not impact the garden space or the neighbours. They state that the neighbours on both sides are supportive and are considering similar extensions, with a letter having been submitted by number 24. and that the overshadowing would be minimal. And there's also a letter from Maastricht Community Centre submitted by the applicant with the review submissions. The next slide just shows from Street View some of the properties that they mentioned in the surrounding area. Obviously, these are all took place at different dates in the past, and they're all also end terrace, I think is a point made by the case officer, and mostly also involve side extensions in addition to the front. The report of handling cites one example in the immediate area at number 16 Spey Road, which is a porch and window that spans about a third across the frontage and was granted planning permission in 1994. So there were no representations to the application. Rhodes had no objection as the driveway would remain over 10 metres in length, and Maastricht Community Council had no comments submitted. So I'll now hand back to members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on this application. Members, remember that if you do not feel that we have enough information to take a decision, we can request further written information be provided, hearings or be arranged, and a site visit to be undertaken. Do we have sufficient information to take a decision? Sorry, going past that. Are we happy to proceed with what we've got?
Yep, happy.
Yeah, okay. Right. Where are we now then? Right, we have sufficient information and no other procedures are required. We can get going. So
We can now hand back to Lucy. Who'll take us through the policies.
I'm just reading through this. So it's back to you, Ms. Green.
Yes, right. I'll go through the policies. Just share my screen again. So the relevant policies in NPF 4, tackling the climate and nature crises, climate mitigation and biodiversity, relevant considerations for every application. Policy 14 on design and policy 16 on quality homes. I'll just move on to those. So policy 16 supports householder developments where they don't have a detrimental impact on the character and quality of the home and the surrounding area in terms of size, design and materials, and they don't have a detrimental impact on neighbouring properties in terms of the physical impact, the overshadowing or overlooking. And policies in the local development plan that are relevant, the site zoned within a residential area, and policy D1 on design, policy D2 on amenity, and that's relevant in terms of optimizing views and sunlight levels of amenity for the occupiers of the property in question and also neighbours, and privacy. And then the householder design guide is also relevant, and I'll come on to that in a moment. The policy H1 supports residential development in principle where it doesn't constitute overdevelopment. It does not have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area. It doesn't result in loss of open space, and it complies with supplementary guidance. So that's the householder design guide in this case. We'll just move on to that. So these are the general principles which state that extensions should be architecturally compatible with the original house and shouldn't overwhelm or dominate the original dwelling. And also that no extensions that took place prior to the introduction of the guide would be considered as justification to fail to comply with the guidance now. So looking at the guidance on front extensions in the Householder Design Guide, these are the relevant points, that they shouldn't impact negatively on the character and amenity of the house and the area, as in common with the general principles. States that established building lines should be respected, that the scale and design should complement the house. Front extensions should be modest and not incorporate additional rooms, and that they should incorporate substantial proportion of glazing. So there's also this final point that in all cases, careful consideration will be given to impact on adjacent properties, visual amenity, and the extent of any building line and position of adjacent buildings generally. And then the design policies in both the LDP, which is D1, and also policy 14 in NPF 4. And in general, the policies both recognise that at any scale, good design and detail adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. And it just goes through some of the factors there. So overall, determination in accordance with development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with each application being treated on its own merits. So for this particular decision, would the proposal comply with policy H1 residential areas, and how would it affect the character and amenity of the area and neighbours, taking into account the householder planning guidance? Does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or other material considerations that would indicate otherwise? Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Members, any questions for Ms. Green? No. Okay. In accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body.
I've got my hand up.
Never saw your hand. Carry on.
Lucy, could you show us again the it was a photo that was quite early in the presentation with just the front view of the house?
Yeah.
If we could just have another wee look at that. Thanks for that. And I've got one more question. I think it's only one more question. The householder APG talks about substantial use of glazing.
Yeah.
If we were minded to approve this, could we put a condition on in relation to the materials used that might require more glazing? I mean, I think we probably need to look at the proposal that's in front of us. I mean, I'm just trying to envisage where we might get more glazing, because a porch would normally have it on the end elevations. I think that's partly what it's getting at, which in this case would be onto neighbouring properties. I mean, I guess they could enlarge the front window, but whether that would be because it goes into a living room. I guess we could, that something could be done potentially to enlarge that window, but yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, what I had in mind was if the porch is adjoining the property immediately to the east, as currently as the proposal is currently before us, that would have I think a solid rendered
wall, if you could put a window in there, is what I was wondering. I'm not sure you could do it on the other side with the front extension to the living room, but it's just the porch side.
Do you mean on the actual side elevation or on the front?
Yeah, side elevation.
I think my concern probably with that would be that we wouldn't be re-notifying neighbours and to introduce something like that onto, because that's their front area. I think that it wouldn't be a good idea to introduce something like that by condition.
Okay, just wanted to clarify whether that would be possible or not.
Yeah. Possibly on the front, but I wouldn't suggest on the side.
Councillor Lawrence, you got anything you want to ask?
No, but I mean, I was thinking along the same lines with the glazing. I mean, we could look at a glazed roof, but I mean, we are now designing the extension, so I don't know how that works.
Well, no, I wasn't thinking that way. Just to confirm, there's no objections from a neighbour on either side, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and we're speaking about, is it 1.5 meters or 1.8 meters that's going to come out?
1.6. I will check that.
So I was going to say, so
yeah, 1.6.
So effectively, what the applicant is doing is the little window to the right of the front door is getting changed to an up and down window as opposed to a small one. So that's additional glazing there. And the current lounge window is basically just being brought forward. Yeah, that window on the right, instead of the little one that's there, as you can see from the picture on the left-hand side, that little one is actually becoming a bigger window. And the lounge window, if you like, is coming forward. That looks like it's a bit bigger than what's there already as well. Would that be about right?
I think it's the same. Looks comparable size to that one.
Okay.
The neighbour's window.
Yeah. That's fine. Thank you, Lucy. Right. Determination. Are we happy to go to determination? Yes, you now state on the decision to respect that case and state for the minute the grounds for that decision. I feel slight conflict with this one. It undoubtedly changes the building line. It's because it's in the middle of a terrace. But at the same time, there's no objections from the neighbours. And it is quite a modest extension of 1.6 metres. In the circumstances, I'd be willing to grant. I think the policy stated, was it D1, quality placemaking, H1. I think it can't comply with that, so I'd be quite happy to grant. How do you feel, John?
At the risk of sounding indecisive, I'm in two minds. When I look at the household development APG,
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe not. When it comes to building lines, I think there are. I can think of lots of places in the city where you would want to maintain the existing building line. I'm thinking of some of the conservation area streets in the West End, for example. But then, having seen the photos of lots of other houses in that area where the building line has been changed, I'm thinking, are we being unreasonable if we were to refuse it? And I'm mindful of the fact that we have a general duty to make reasonable decisions. So I'm not sure. That's not very helpful. See what Graham thinks.
Have a think about it for a minute. Councillor Lawrence, opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's in a big long drive. I know the area quite well. It's a big long drive, and I don't think there's any real detrimental impact. And the amenity, I don't think is adversely affected really. And because of the size of the drive, it's no overdevelopment. And I mean, as you say, there's no complaint from any neighbours, and I would be looking to grant.
Thank you for that. I think I would go back. Lucy, you had a screen with the neighbour stuff about MP4 and others. Can you go back to that screen possibly?
Sorry, what?
It's the one about the
AP,
neighbours. I can't remember what
the
it's called.
APG.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Because it seems to comply with one but be in conflict with the other.
Right, I'll just go back to going the wrong way. Oh, this is a slow way of doing it. Yeah, that was the general principles, but
Yeah. Right,
did you mean?
That's the one I want. I mean, the established building line should be respected, but we've seen examples of where it's not. So it is in conflict with that one. The scale designed to complement the house, well, I suppose it does. Modest, and it's not additional rooms, it's merely extending what's there at the moment. So in the circumstances, I'd be happy to grant this one. So we'll just put it to the vote. So I'll vote grant. Councillor Lawrence?
I agree, grant.
Councillor Cook?
I'm tempted to say no vote, but it's in the material anyway, since we've got already 2 people saying we grant it. Even if I said no or no vote, it's not going to make any difference. So I'm not going to die in a ditch over that.
So you're going to make it unanimous, or are you going against?
Yeah. Well, I'll make it unanimous then. You've convinced me.
Okay, thank you. Right. The local review body has therefore agreed to unanimously uphold the decision. Sorry, no, I haven't. The local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer and will need to consider whether any conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. Lucy, any advice, 3 conditions?
The materials are all noted on the drawing, so I don't think there's anything that I can think of that would need to be conditioned.
That's fine. I'm happy to take that. Everybody happy with that? Well, the relative decision notice will be sent out in due course to the applicant's agent in the coming days. Thank you. That's just finished. Thank you all for your forbearance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
I wish I'd done one of the first 2 because they were more straightforward.
Hey, listen, that's why you get a big bucks, John. Thanks very much, Graham.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.